welcome back. We're just going to go ahead and dive right into this episode, and it's about what snake do you want as your first snake. And here I have John Lemon to help me. He's about an 8-month-old male ball python. If you're particular about morphs, he is a lemonback ball python, and I think he is absolutely amazing. But even though I think he's amazing, he might not very well make a very good first-time snake for some people. These guys get pretty big and they eat fairly big size prey, and they're a more heavy-bodied snake. They're not really something that you're going to see out and about cruising in their enclosure too often. You know, usually if you see that kind of behavior, they're out maybe hunting or just kind of checking things out. But this can be pretty intimidating for a first-time family, having to deal with a snake that is this big and then having to watch them get bigger and bigger and bigger. So if you're afraid of big snakes, then this might not be the species for you. But also, they need a bigger enclosure, and their enclosure has to fit certain specifications. They need certain kinds of temperatures, and they need certain humidity requirements, which is not altogether a hard thing to achieve, but it is, and it can be if you're new or in certain environments, it is pretty hard to keep your humidity levels. They're very docile, and they tend to be called pet rocks because, you know, they hide, they chill, they act like a rock. Again, you're not going to really see them out cruising around. I know that John Lemon here seems a little bit energetic today, but that's just because we're lucky, and he really likes to show off for the camera, even though he's typically a very, very shy little snake. I'm John Lemon. Now, that being said, ball pythons do eat a larger prey, which can be more expensive, and it also might make your options about where you could get your feeding supplies pretty limited. You'll have to decide whether or not you want to feed a live or a frozen thawed prey, which is something that we'll go into in another episode. But for now, research. If you like a heavy-bodied snake and you're not scared of them and you like something a little bit more slow-moving, then this might very well be a good first choice of snake. Now, they do go on hunger strikes from time to time. Anything could trigger a feeding strike for a ball python. They're just pretty notorious for it. And that can be very disconcerting for first-time snake keepers. Us as people, you know, our human nature tells us that we need to see you eat. We want to feed you. And not all the time are they going to be very receptive to that. And that's also very troublesome to some people, and it could cause them to panic. And there's a lot of mixed information online about what to do about a feeding strike, and some people will immediately jump to drastic measures that might actually cost them the life of their snake without them even really knowing that they're causing any problems at all. That being said, that's a pretty big con for a ball python as a first-time pet. This is my corn snake, Elvira. She's a year old. She's a little bit younger than John Lemon, the ball python that I just showed you, though she is a lot smaller. And this might be a better choice for someone that's more afraid of the bigger bodied snakes. They are still very, very docile and make very good pets, but they're not quite as hardy, if you will, in terms of, you know, being able to be a decent snake for a child. At least not until they get a lot bigger than this. Though they'll never get as big as ball pythons get. But they do stay very docile, you know, as babies. They're a bit more wiggly, but they also are more energetic, which means that they are much better and much more ferocious feeders than ball pythons. I personally have never had one refuse a meal unless they were shedding, which makes, you know, a huge difference to people. You know, again, with the ball pythons that are notorious for feeding strikes, these guys are notorious for eating everything. I almost never have any issues with sweet little Elvira here. That being said, their enclosures need to be a lot smaller, which is a bit more cost effective. Their prey is a lot smaller, which makes them a lot more cost effective to feed. They also are very polymorphic. You can get lots of different color combinations on these guys, which is really cool. They're really sweet. They don't get super big, but they are fun to watch. They're not usually hidden as much as ball pythons are. So you'll see a lot more of these guys and they'll be a little bit more fun to watch and feed. But again, make sure that you do your research and make sure that you have a perfect setup for these guys. They are, again, a little bit more forgiving whenever it comes to their setups, and maybe your temperatures or your humidity isn't perfect. These guys are not going to go downhill immediately by any means. But, you know, of course you should always want to make sure that your enclosure is as great as you could possibly get it. But for a first-time snake keeper, having a little bit more of a forgiveness is really kind of critical, in my opinion. These guys, because they eat a lot easier, they're a lot more comfortable for people to keep. Now, the size isn't always that impressive, and a lot of people would like a more heavy-bodied snake. But I think at the end of the day that it's really important to pick something not based off of what it looks like, but based off of what is more appropriate for you. If you're somebody that is very nervous about feeding snakes and you're nervous about having one that goes on feeding strikes, these guys do not have that kind of issue. They're little garbage disposal. They're also super, super sweet. So just because they're not huge in size, I do think that these guys make a superior first-time pet snake. I'm a huge stickler whenever it comes to doing research. I have a lot of people that come to me and ask questions, and I certainly don't mind answering them. But I get a little bit put off whenever people don't take the time to do any of their own research. Reading is a good thing. These animals live for a very long time, you know, upwards of 20 years or more. And you need to make sure that you're prepared, and just having basic knowledge on them is the very least that you can do. And not just expecting somebody to spoon feed you information, or going to the pet store and letting one of those people tell you, you know, to buy this kit or this, that, and you end up getting home and before long you have a sick snake or an issue and you don't know how to fix it. That's not okay. You have to make sure that if you're going to go this far to watch this video about what to get as your first snake, read an article. Read something about substrates, where these animals come from, how to set up a proper enclosure. Don't get lost in the hype of the good old-fashioned fight between tank setups and tub setups. These are things that all play a very big role, and at the heart of it all is an animal that relies on us, and we have to do the due diligence to give them the best possible care that we could come up with. And just asking a couple of questions or waiting until your snake has a problem before you speak up is not necessarily responsible snake keeping. So again, if you have questions, ask them. But don't just fall in love with a snake and then run out and buy one. And now that we've said this much, where you get a snake from plays a big difference in the quality of animal that you could be getting. A lot of different animals, you know, can be wild caught, and because of that can be very difficult to keep. They oftentimes struggle to live in captivity and don't adapt very well. Now, not all breeders are going to be that way, but not all breeders are created equal. And this is not a debate that I'm going to get into about who's a good breeder. That's something that you will find in proper research and reaching out and talking to experts in the field and getting decent recommendations on how to find a reputable breeder. Don't just park it at the pet store and fall in love with a little face and then bring it home and not have any idea what you're doing or where this animal even came from. Ask questions to your breeder about what kind of setups that they're kept in. Ask for pictures. Ask when your animal is eating. Ask what they've been eating. Ask what technique they use to feed. All of these are very critical for not even just first-time snake keepers, but everyone across the board. I'm always asking everyone that I get snakes from about exactly what they're feeding, exactly what their techniques are, and exactly how they're keeping them before they come to me, so that I can make sure that I have that basic knowledge to be able to provide to them the care that they need. And that's just the least that I can do as an animal owner. This is pretty much standard information across the board for everything. Everything you should do your due diligence before you take them home. But we're talking about snakes today, and one of these species of snakes is, again, notorious for going on hunger strikes. And if you're not prepared to buy feeders that may never get fed, or you might end up with pet mice. These are all realistic possibilities to think about, and it's a lot more than what the snakes look like in pictures. Overall, they are really simple pets to keep if you do it right, and that's really overall critical. I would be glad to help anyone find their way and find right information and do whatever I need to do to help to make sure that their animal is thriving. But I don't want to spoon feed it to anyone. I want you to meet me halfway, and I think that anybody should want the same. That you should make sure that you know enough about this animal that before you start asking me questions, that you'll have at least a basic understanding to know whether or not I'm just saying nonsense or if I'm giving you good guidance. I love this snake. He's so awesome. So, make sure that you're finding an appropriate setup, or make sure that you're, well, I guess I should probably cut that.